as they may, I will now start to present the documentation. Thousands of years before Adam and Eve, and we know that Adam and Eve is the allegorical characters in the Hebrew book, a book called Genesis. And in order to speak about Adam and Eve, we must then give Adam and Eve a date if we are to say that there were no people before or all people came subsequently. Then we must establish a date for Adam and Eve. It is commonly stated in Western circles, particularly in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that approximately 6,000 years ago, a god, the Jewish god Jehovah, and if you're Christian, then of course the Christian God Jesus the Christ, and obviously if you're Muslim, then it is the Muslim God Allah, created this world. Now that is difficult for me to understand when you consider that 6,000 years ago, my people along the Nile were doing engineering, science, law, medicine, and a host of other disciplines. Yet the world wasn't here yet. Now I do not know which world they were operating under. But then let us explore at who could have possibly brought about the concept of an Adam and Eve, since it is that it is only in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam you find these two allegorical characters. Since it is that we find it for the first time in the Hebrew Bible, or Jewish Bible, a Bible called the Chumash, or the Pentateuch, and such other name, as well as the Torah, otherwise called the 5 books of Moses, we would find that the Jews presented this for the first time to the world. We must then find who are the Jews that presented it, since all the Jews did not write it. The first time we are to have the Adam and Eve concept comes out of the Jewish intellectual circle, a system called the Sanhedrin, S-A-N-H-E-D-R-I-N. The Sanhedrin put out that book, or started to write that book, in approximately 700 BC, and completed it around 500 BC. The person to whom they gave credit for the story of bringing into the world the concept of Jehovah, the Jewish God, Yahweh, was a man called Avram, A-V-R-M, who changed his name to Abraham, assuming, we must assume, as he stated, that an angel of this God came to him while at state in a dream. You would find that all of the prophets got their messages by dreams. And all of the other writers got their state of information by dream. Not a solitary one being sober at the time and at a state of consciousness. But we find that Abraham was not born till approximately 1775 BC. This will put Abraham's birth sometime between the 13th dynastic period of the Africans of the Nile Valley. Meaning then, if we are to use the chronological data of most Western European writers, who gave the first dynastic period of Egypt anywhere from about 5000 BC to about 3100 BC, we will find then that at least the first dynasty of the Africans was at minimum more than 1500 years before the birth of the first Jew, Abraham. More so, that Abraham himself, based upon the Jews, along with his own parents, were worshiping an African goddess by the name of Hathor, symbolized by a cow with a sun disk between her horns. The sun disk symbolizing Amen-Ra. the god of the ancient Africans of the Nile, not only Egypt, Amen being the god of the north and Ra being the god of the south. When Nama, this African king, fought Scorpio, the other king, the king to the north, himself to the south, defeated Scorpio, joined the two states into one, making one Egypt, or the beginning of dynastic Egypt. That combination of the two states, bringing the two concepts of God, Amen and Ra, created for the Egyptians and others in that area a single unity, a single deity by the name of Amen Ra. Now, the Africans along the Nile, and in particular Egypt, had already worshipped a god by the name of Ptah, or Ptah, P-T-A-H. Ptah was the god prior to the first dynasty and the prominent god up until the third dynasty. Sometime around the third dynasty, we find that the ancient Africans of Egypt, otherwise called Egyptians today, introduced another god, and that was the god Amen Ra. Well, let us go farther. Along with the introduction of Ptah and Amen Ra were other sources of information relating to deity. One, it was at that time that the Africans revised their sacred book, their Bible, a book called the Book of the Coming Forth by Day and by Night, to which an Englishman by the name of Ernest A. Wallace Budge, in his translation from the hieratic writing, one of the most ancient writings today by the Africans, part of what is today called hieroglyph, Budge translating that did not take the literary translation of the title, but took one of these, we would say, titles that would draw attention and call it the Egyptian Book of the Dead. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, using Budge's description for it, we will find an important section. That section is called the Osirian drama. Osiris was in the extology of the ancient Africans of the Nile, the god who was the direct son. This should bring a lot of attention to most of you. The direct son of the god Amen Ra, or Ptah, depending on what period of time you're speaking about. Osiris was the god whose mother had him by a virgin birth, whose mother conceived him by an immaculate conception. I am speaking about 4,100 years before Jesus the Christ. May I repeat that because it may be difficult for many of you. I said that Osiris, the god I'm speaking about, who is sometimes said to be simultaneously Horus, and at other times the father of Horus. Irrespective, let us replace him with Horus. And he becomes the father of Horus. Therefore, what we have here is that the father Osiris, the son of the god Ptah, had a child who was supposedly conceived by his mother, the goddess Isis, and who gave birth to Horus by a virgin birth 4,100 years before Mary did the same thing again. Now this should be difficult to a lot of you born-again Christians, because you have been told that the first and only time that such a story was told was 1982 years ago. Let me not disappoint you further by saying that Jesus is the last of 16 such crucified saviors.